Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for spending time with me again to listen to another interview by an inspiring South African entrepreneur. So I'm going to hand over right now to Nokwazi, who is going to tell us more about her inspiring business and her journey in entrepreneurship.
Hi, Melanie, and hi, everybody. First of all, thank you for inviting me and for allowing me to share my story. I was quite excited when you sent me the message because we have a very common vision. So the work I do is about empowering entrepreneurs. And that's what I started 7 years ago. So my life, I'm actually a KZNer. Um, Born in Durban, school in Ishowe, high school in Maritzburg, and varsity in Durban again, and then ended up in Johannesburg. And I worked for corporate for 8 years. So 5 years in South Africa, and I ended up in Kenya for 3 years. And what was quite interesting about that is that even though I enjoyed my time in corporate and I felt that I did well, there was just always something in me that felt like I'm doing well, but there's more. Like there is more that I can do. And so I think after 8 years in corporate, I just decided, you know what, let me explore what this is. But me being a typical, I would say, fundi or nerd, I decided to go do my MBA because I'm actually a scientist, also did cell biology, but ended up in business. So I always had that background in security of I'm in business, but I have a science background. And so in that sense, I did my MBA and did it in the US and China. And I came back home and I was meant to go back to work, but I couldn't. I just couldn't get myself to go back to work. And it was quite funny because my family was quite irritated. Well, let me not say irritated, I'd say shocked. They were shocked because for the first time ever in my whole life, they were not used to me not knowing what I want and me not working. And I totally zoned out for about 6, 7 months doing nothing. And then one day I got off my laurels and went online and I saw this advert for volunteers. They were looking for volunteers for the 10,000 Women program. And I wrote to them and I asked, I said, you know what, I have the time, I have an MBA, I have 8 years in corporate, I would love to share my experience. And that is how my business journey started. I started off as a volunteer, and because of the work that I did with these women as a coach and as a mentor, a few of them started asking me if I actually do this for money. And at the time, it was like, no, I'm just a volunteer. I'm still trying to decide what my life is. And then somebody actually came to me with a great contract. And I was like, okay, take this seriously. Maybe there's something here. And so I started consulting to really small businesses and also consulting and working with, I'd say, entrepreneurship development organizations. So at the specific time, it was a nonprofit that worked with entrepreneurs across SADC. And that was really great experience for me because then I got to get to understand and see just how different the landscape is for small businesses outside of South Africa. And so because of that, that's how I started. But it wasn't typical. It wasn't an immediate success. So even though I had these customers, what happened was I totally underpriced myself. I totally undervalued the work that I was putting in. And I made that mistake, and that I think a lot of us who are in services make, where I thought, let me come in cheaper because they're small businesses. And so I came in really cheap, and it was just unsustainable. But the beauty of, I guess, having done my MBA and all the skills I'd learned, I remembered the business modeling skills that I'd learned. So kind of went back to my books, started researching again, and realized that I need to rethink my business model. So I had really become clear that I want to work with small businesses. And so I was like, I'm not going to stop doing this, but I just need to think of how I'm going to make money whilst doing this. And and I think sometimes when you're quite clear on your purpose, it really helps you to stay centered. Because a few people came to me with corporate contracts. So why don't you go consult for corporate and do work for them for 6 months and this and that? And it didn't sit well. So, I knew that would solve the money problem, but I'd be moving away from what I wanted to do. And so I rethought my business model, and funny enough, I ended up doing work at corporate. But doing work at corporate, we wanted to empower entrepreneurs, and that's how then my business started to grow, because I now had what is called a third-party model, where somebody else pays you to work with someone else. And so it was a corporate, it was a business schools, and it was an incubators. And basically the work that I have been doing with entrepreneurs, mainly with startups. So I really enjoy working with someone who's still at an ideation phase, and helping them think about, is there an opportunity in this, and how do they structure it, and how do they think about it. I will go back to the business model, because that's really the core foundation of how I work and where I work from, especially now, because I think most entrepreneurs, and even aspiring entrepreneurs or small businesses, they're so used to seeing the models that are out there. And so they think, if I'm going to start a business, right, as a bakery, I need to do what that bakery is doing. Yes. And not really taking the time to design a proper business model that will fit the current times and will also differentiate them from that bakery. And so I use business modeling as a core of what I do, and even what I've been facilitating at business schools. So even in the business school programs, and even in the incubator programs, I'm pulled in specifically as a business modeling or a social business model, I'd say, expert, and I facilitate around that. And then also I've coached businesses directly, and then after 3 years, I started noticing that small businesses were making the same mistakes. So now that I was working now, not just with startups, but with those who've been running for 3, 4, 5 years, I started noticing the same issues. And so what I did is then I decided to look back on my journey and how I started. And I created the Small Business Handbook. And just really just meant to be more of just a tool to help people navigate the small things like turnover tax. Like if you don't have an accountant, and sometimes accountants don't even know about that, you end up paying 28% tax, and there's turnover tax that's meant to be for small businesses. Helping people just think through that marketing is not necessarily expensive for small businesses. There are different ways they can think about it. So I decided to take my hard-earned lessons for the first, I'd say, 3 to 4 years, and all the mistakes I'd made. And I just thought, what if I was able to take this and put it into something that other people could utilize? And that's how I then got into creating content for entrepreneurs. And so the Small Business Handbook, and then I thought to myself, well, I live in South Africa, and actually the most spoken language is isiZulu. It's not English. English is the language of business. So I decided to translate the book into isiZulu.
Okay.
And now we have the book in isiZulu. But also what's interesting is then the journey was quite interesting in the sense that we are orators as Africans. And so even though there's a huge readership in Zulu newspapers and KZN, still most people will tend to want to listen to something. And so even though I had this great vision of providing this Zulu book that's providing the same content that I had in English, it didn't take off in the same way that the English book did. And that was a big lesson for me, an interesting lesson as well, in terms of, okay, so as I think about how do I work with small businesses, and also how do I work with small businesses that come originally from my communities, because that's the thing, the work I've been doing, 99% of it, and I mean, I'm based in Johannesburg. My clients are mainly in, I guess, the Greater Sandton area. And that's where the majority of the entrepreneurs tend to be. And then I was inspired and I said, well, I'm doing work in the area where people actually have access. What about the communities that don't have access? And then I was approached by a nonprofit who asked me to help them empower creche owners in the poorest communities of Johannesburg. And so we designed a program from scratch and really based it on the principles of the work that I've been doing with the business schools. And just took the principles of we had to make it multilingual, we had to ensure that the content was actually good caliber content. So it shouldn't be dumbed down. It should be simplified, but not dumbed down. And so that started a project that we also do in the business where it's called Agwande Ukanya, which means may the light spread. And really it's about if we empower these women who take care of children in our poorest communities, and the reality is that they're not profitable. And like 20 to 30% of the kids who come to their creches can't afford to pay, but they continue doing this. And, you know, Melanie, in the 7 years that I've been doing this work and with entrepreneurs, and, you know, always hear people saying, oh, I don't have the money. And, you know, there's not enough funding. I don't have customers and, right? So, I mean, that's the narrative. And we always hear, like, what are the top 5 issues that entrepreneurs face in South Africa? Then you step into one of the poorest communities in this country. So this particular township is Diepsloot, where they charge as little as 150 to 350 Rand a child. And they started with nothing. The stories blew me away. And, you know, I just remember saying to somebody, I thought I was coming in to help. And yes, I am helping, but I've learned so much more. Because when we talk about bootstrapping,
yes.
You know, like one of these ladies, she's like, I saved my stockfile money for a year to start this creche.
Wow.
The one was out, like I used to be a cleaner and I used to come back and I used to see our children running around in the street. So I clapped together with my cousins and we put money together and we started the first creche in Diepsloot. And the stories are like that. So you're taking women who literally have been earning less than minimum wage and who were able to find ways to start these ECDs and to start these creches. And really our vision then has been, how do we empower them so that they stop seeing their creches as nonprofits and that they just there to help the community, but to actually see them as businesses that can be sustainable. Because if they learn the right skills, right, they'll be able to, you know, write a proposal to, I don't know, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I mean, I'm just choosing a random foundation, you know, but, you know, or to the Lotto Foundation. So, and then they'll be able to manage their money. And then they'll be able to see, actually, this is where we're overspending and this is what we can leverage. You know, I mean, for me, one of the most touching case studies or feedback that we got from one of the ladies is that when she joined our program, she only had back rooms that she had changed into a creche. And then we made her see the opportunity that, so it was, and this one was in Cosmo City, that the majority of people who work there work long hours, 6 to 6. And they work in the factories, and some of them work night shift. So when these children leave your creche and they go to grade R or grade 1, and they leave school at 1 o'clock, who are they going back to? And then she realized, actually, there's an opportunity for an after-school support program. So then she said to the parents, well, even though you've left my creche, and the nice thing is that, you know, I don't know if it's the nice thing, I think the problem that we have in SA is that even though I'll say basic education for free is free, but ECDs aren't. ECDs aren't. They may be subsidized, but they're not free. And so now that the parents weren't paying school fees, they had money to send their kids to an after school program, which is then they come into a safe place and with someone they know. But then also then they realized, hey, one said, do you mind keeping my child overnight? Because I'm working night shift. And then that's how she grew her business. From just being an unsustainable creche to recognizing, actually, what other problems can I solve in this community and become sustainable. And so we spoke to her about 4 months ago, and she shared the story with us. So for me, that's really what I do. I truly believe that business skills should be demystified. And that everybody has the potential to create and to build, and what we need to teach them is how to monetize and how to bring that to market. And, you know, whether I'm working with a business school in Sandton, or whether I'm working with an ECD creche, you know, in Diepsloot, or hopefully, I don't know, bringing it online and sharing it with more people. That's really the vision, and that's really where we need to go to. Because when you look at economies that are really sustainable, like Germany, I mean, I think Germany has estimated 95% small businesses. Well, you know, revenues are very different to ours, but it's that. It's not the big companies. The big companies are a small fraction, and it's the small businesses that are keeping the economy thriving. And so for me, that's kind of my vision, and that's my story. And, you know, and you always say, you'll never understand. And I think it's a Steve Jobs quote that says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. And so I come from a township in Durban. My parents were township entrepreneurs. And when my dad died, when I was 12, my mom had to work really hard to keep these businesses thriving, and some of them did not thrive. So now when I look back, when I left varsity, I did not think I'd be doing what I'm doing today. But now when I look back, I just see how much of my journey has been inspired by watching my mom and seeing what she did and how she managed to, I guess, change our lives and also inspire a whole lot of other people in our community. So yes, that's my story.
Wow, that's such a beautiful and inspiring story there. My head's just buzzing with questions that I want to ask you. I feel as though we should have 1,000 conversations coming out of just this one. There's so much that resonates with me. I've always looked at our unemployment numbers in this country and said, if only we can just flip all of those unemployed people into self-employed people, we wouldn't have the economic challenges that we do.
Yes, yes, I agree. I mean, like if you think about it, Melanie, like a small business can hire 5 people.
Mm. Mm.
Just 5 people. Imagine if we had more of just, everybody, the incubators, they trying to create the unicorns, the Mark Zuckerbergs, and we don't need that. Yes, there's a place for that, but we need to teach somebody how to run a bakery and sell bread, and employ a few people to help them do that. I met a young guy who's teaching people how to ride a bicycle. And I went and learned how to ride a bicycle a year ago at this old age, but I was willing to pay. And how do you support someone like that who's noticed there's an opportunity in teaching people how to run bicycles? And, and you could hire 3 or 4 people to help them with that. So there's so many opportunities, and there's so many problems that can be solved. And we need to give people the tools, but it's not just the tools. I think it's a mindset. I think, and we come from a country where we are taught to work, and I think it's not just the country; it's the whole world, right? It's capitalism is built that the 1% will own, and then the rest of us will work for that 1%, and it's all over the world. And we need to empower everybody to realize that actually you've got the potential to create, to build, and to make your own living.
I actually, on one of the groups the other day, somebody asked the question, who are your business role models? And everyone in the comments there said that they brought all these famous names out, the Oprah Winfreys and all of those people, but also international people. And I said to them, the people that I really respect are the ones who have these really small businesses, the spaza shops, these creches that you're talking about, where those people, in spite of challenges, still show up every day and find ways to push through in spite of those severe challenges. And those are the people that I find really the most inspiring. Their courage is something amazing to me.
Yes. Oh, we talk about courage. I agree. I've never seen such fearless warrior women. Yeah.
And so you seem to do a lot of work with incubators, and incubators are supposed to exist to take on this challenge that we have in our country, and yet you say that they're working looking for the unicorns. Why are they not doing the work on the ground with the small businesses?
So I think when the whole incubator model started, it's I think the typical, let's go copy what's happening in the US and bring it over to the side. Then also I think the whole mentality of let's go for growth entrepreneurs, and obviously if we go for growth entrepreneurs, they will create more jobs. So I think fundamentally that was the thinking behind that. There are a lot of township programs that exist. Largely, I would say either nonprofit or government led, and even now the incubators that were kind of based more in town have started moving into the township. So they're slowly cropping up and popping up with regards to that. But I think fundamentally, and it's interesting when I critique this, I'm almost in a sense critiquing myself. But I've also learned from my 7 years is that, sometimes you work on a program where they want to work with 20 entrepreneurs, but they're all from different industries and different spaces. And when you think about that, what you end up doing, you end up providing generic information that is not necessarily specific to a person or an industry and so forth. And so I just think there's a lot of rethinking that needs to happen in terms of, how these incubators are structured, how they brought into the townships and to the poorer communities, what kind of content is brought in, you know, and I also think what really needs to happen, and not just township work, but even the incubators in the cities, is that, you know, we need to go back and remodel and just say, how can we design these incubators from like a human-centered perspective, so that we're designing it around the context of where these potential entrepreneurs or business owners are from, versus coming in with a model that's pre-designed and then trying to implement that. So, you know, I think they're a lot, they're myriad. I think South Africa has over, I think I read somewhere over 300 incubators and 300 accelerators. So you've got to ask yourself, if we've got that many, then why is our employment rate so high? Why is the failure rate so high for small businesses? So something in the formula is not working. It's working for some, because there definitely are success stories. I've seen corporates, I find that a lot of the corporate programs where it's aligned to the corporate values and where the corporates really want to build, I've seen those programs be really successful. So I just think they're pockets. And I think, you know, and this discussion has been happening in the space, is that how do we pivot and how do we just continue to find better ways so that we have impact. But I think the key thing though, Melanie, in this whole entrepreneurship development space is that we always need to remember that we're not necessarily developing businesses, we're developing humans. And a human may have the greatest opportunity in front of them, but if their mindset is not right, if they're, you know, if that is not right, then it doesn't matter how great the opportunity is. And so I also think that, and you're starting to see it with a few of them, people are bringing more personal mastery, personal development on developing the person first before developing the business. And I think that's also a shift that started to happen and something that wasn't there necessarily in the past.
Now, Nokwazi, I noticed that we are running out of time. That went so quickly. I feel like I want to have 1,000 more conversations with you. If anybody's looking for you, where can we find you on the social networks and online?
So I'm definitely on LinkedIn as Nokwazi Mzobe. And then my business pages are Matoyana Media on LinkedIn and also on Facebook. So that's where they can get hold of me. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. I'm super thankful for the amazing, rich value that you've added to this content for all of us. I think everybody listening could learn from the things that you said today. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. Take care.